not ready, not worthy. It does not attack you loudly, but it erodes you slowly from within. This is the true nature of negative thought, and if you do not learn to understand it, it will quietly take control of your inner world. Carl Jung believed that the greatest struggles of a human being do not come from the outside world, but from the unseen landscape within. What we call suffering is often not the result of events themselves, but the way our mind interprets them, repeats them, and attaches meaning to them. Imagine your mind as a vast inner garden. Every thought is a seed. Some seeds bring growth, clarity, and peace, while others bring fear, doubt, and confusion. The danger is not that negative seeds appear, because they always will. The danger is that most people do not notice when they begin to grow, and by the time they do, the garden is already overrun. You may have experienced this without realizing it. A moment where nothing is happening, yet your mind begins to replay something from the past. A conversation, a mistake, a rejection. It feels real again, as if it is happening now. Your body reacts, your emotions follow, and suddenly you are no longer in the present moment. You are trapped inside a memory shaped by interpretation, not truth. This is what Jung referred to as the unobserved psyche, the part of the mind that operates automatically, repeating patterns that were never questioned. Most people assume their thoughts are facts, but they are not. They are interpretations, often inherited, often learned, often repeated so many times that they feel permanent. A belief such as, "I am not good enough," is rarely something you created consciously. It is something you absorbed, something that was reinforced, something that became familiar. And familiarity, even when painful, can feel like truth. That is why so many people remain trapped inside their own thinking, not because they cannot escape, but because they do not realize they are inside a pattern at all. Jung did not suggest that you simply replace negative thoughts with positive ones. He understood that the human mind is far more complex than that. Instead, he pointed toward something deeper, something more transformative. He invited us to observe the mind rather than immediately believe it, because the moment you observe a thought, you create distance from it. And in that distance, something powerful happens. You begin to see that the thought is not you. It is something that appears within you, but it does not define you. There is a simple way to begin this shift, and it does not require anything complicated. The next time a negative thought appears, do not fight it. Do not push it away, and do not immediately believe it. Instead, pause and look at it as if it were something external. Ask yourself where it came from. Ask yourself if it is absolutely true. Ask yourself what would happen if you chose not to follow it. This small moment of awareness is the beginning of freedom, because what you resist blindly often grows stronger, but what you observe consciously begins to lose its grip. This is one of the central insights in Jung's work. He believed that what remains unconscious controls your life, and you call it fate. But what becomes conscious can be transformed. That is the difference between living reactively and living deliberately. Your mind is not designed to harm you. It is a tool. But like any tool, it can become destructive if left untrained. And most people never learn how to train it. They are taught what to think, what to believe, what to achieve, but not how to observe their own inner world. As a result, they become identified with every thought that arises. If the thought says, "You will fail," they feel defeated. If the thought says, "You're not enough," they withdraw. They do not question the voice, they obey it. And over time, this creates a pattern. The same thoughts repeat, the same emotions follow, and the same outcomes appear. It begins to feel like life itself is against them, when in reality, it is the unexamined mind repeating a familiar script. Jung described this as the unconscious directing life, shaping experiences in ways that feel inevitable but are actually conditioned. There is something important to understand here. Negative thoughts are not random. They are often connected to what Jung called the shadow, the parts of yourself that you have rejected, suppressed, or hidden because they were not accepted at some point in your life. These parts do not disappear. They remain in the unconscious, influencing your thoughts and reactions in subtle ways. For example, if you learned early in life that expressing emotion was weakness, you may have pushed that part of yourself away. But it does not vanish. It returns as inner tension, as self-criticism, as anxiety. The mind creates narratives to justify what it does not understand, and those narratives often take the form of negative thoughts. In this sense, negative thinking is not the enemy. It is a signal. It is the psyche trying to reveal something that has not yet been acknowledged. This is why trying to eliminate negative thoughts completely is not only unrealistic, but also unhelpful. The goal is not suppression. The goal is awareness and integration. When you begin to recognize where your thoughts come from, when you see the patterns behind them, they begin to lose their power, not because they disappear, but because you are no longer controlled by them. Think of it like this. If you're standing in the middle of a storm, you feel overwhelmed, powerless, and consumed by it. But if you step back and observe the storm from a distance, you see that it is something passing through, not something that defines the sky itself. You're not the storm. You are the space in which it appears. This shift in perspective changes everything. It gives you the ability to choose your response rather than react automatically. It allows you to question what once felt unquestionable. And most importantly, it reconnects you with a deeper part of yourself that is not defined by fear, doubt, or past conditioning. However, awareness alone is not enough. Once you begin to see your thoughts clearly, you must also begin to reshape the inner environment in which they exist. Just as a gardener does not simply remove weeds, but also plants new seeds, you must actively cultivate thoughts that support growth. This does not mean repeating empty affirmations. It means consciously choosing ideas that align with who you are becoming. A simple practice can begin this process. Each morning, before the world demands your attention, take a moment to sit quietly and write down a few statements that reflect your direction, not your current limitation, not what you fear, but what you're moving toward. Over time, this practice begins to recondition the mind, not through force, but through consistency. Transformation does not happen in a single moment of motivation. It happens through repeated awareness, repeated choice, and repeated action. And this is where the idea of the inner warrior emerges, not as someone who fights the external world, but as someone who learns to face their own mind without fear. Because the true battle is not against your thoughts, but against the unconscious patterns that generate them. And the more you bring those patterns into awareness, the less control they have over you. This is the path Jung described, not a path of perfection, but a path of integration. And somewhere within you, there is already a part that understands this, a part that is tired of repeating the same mental loops, a part that senses there is more beyond the constant noise of doubt and fear. That part is not something you need to create, it is something you need to listen to. As you begin to observe your thoughts instead of immediately believing them, something subtle but powerful starts to shift. You create space, and within that space, you discover something most people never realize, that you're not defined by the voice in your head, but by the awareness that hears it. This awareness is quiet, steady, and untouched by the chaos of negative thinking. It does not judge, it does not rush, it simply observes. And the more you return to it, the more stable your inner world becomes. But this process is not always comfortable. In fact, it can feel unsettling at first, because when you stop running from your thoughts, you begin to see them more clearly. You begin to notice patterns you ignored, beliefs you carried without question, and emotions that were never fully understood. This is the moment many people turn away, not because they are weak, but because they have never been taught how to face themselves without fear. Jung described this as the encounter with the shadow, the part of you that holds everything you were taught to hide. It may contain fear, anger, shame, insecurity, but also strength, creativity, and potential that were never expressed. The shadow is not negative by nature. It is simply unacknowledged. And what remains unacknowledged continues to influence your life from behind the scenes. When you experience strong negative thoughts, it is often the shadow trying to surface, not to harm you, but to be seen. For example, a harsh inner voice that criticizes you may not be an enemy, but a reflection of an old wound, something you internalized long ago. Instead of rejecting it, you can begin to ask what it is trying to reveal. What part of you has not been heard? What truth has been avoided? This is where transformation begins, not by destroying the shadow, but by integrating it. Integration means recognizing that these parts exist within you without letting them control you. It means accepting your complexity instead of forcing yourself into a limited identity. And through this acceptance, something remarkable happens. The energy that once appeared as negativity begins to change form. What was once self-criticism can become self-awareness. What was once fear can become caution and wisdom. What was once anger can become clarity and the ability to set boundaries. The same energy once understood becomes constructive instead of destructive. This is why Jung believed that the goal is not to become perfect, but to become whole. And wholeness requires self-compassion, not the kind that avoids responsibility, but the kind that allows growth without constant self-punishment. Many people believe that being hard on themselves will make them better, but in reality, it often creates the opposite effect. It reinforces fear, reduces confidence, and keeps them trapped in the same patterns they are trying to escape. Ask yourself something simple. If someone you care about made a mistake, would you speak to them the way you speak to yourself? Would you call them worthless, incapable, or a failure? Most likely not. You would offer understanding, encouragement, and patience. Yet when it comes to yourself, the standard becomes harsh and unforgiving. This imbalance is one of the root causes of persistent negative thinking. When you begin to treat yourself with the same respect you offer others, your internal dialogue changes. It becomes less hostile, more supportive, more balanced. This does not mean ignoring your flaws. It means addressing them in a way that leads to growth rather than collapse. It means recognizing that you are a work in progress, not a finished product that must meet impossible standards. There is also something else you need to understand. You cannot always control the first thought that appears in your mind. That thought often comes from past conditioning, from habits formed over time. But you can control the second thought, the response you choose. And this response is where your power lies. For example, if a thought arises saying, "I cannot do this," you may not be able to stop it from appearing. But you can choose what comes next. You can question it. You can replace it with something more constructive, such as, "I am learning," or "I will find a way." This is not about denial. It is about direction. It is about choosing thoughts that lead to growth rather than limitation. Over time, this practice reshapes your mental patterns. The brain adapts to repetition. The more you reinforce certain thoughts, the more natural they become. This is not just a philosophical idea, it is a practical reality. What you think repeatedly becomes your default state, and your default state shapes your experience of life. But transformation is not linear. There will be moments when old patterns return, when negative thoughts feel strong again, when progress seems to disappear. This does not mean you have failed. It means you are encountering deeper layers of the same process. Growth often involves revisiting old patterns with new awareness. When this happens, the most important thing is not to judge yourself. Judgment only reinforces the cycle. Instead, return to observation. Notice what is happening without immediately reacting. This simple act interrupts the pattern and gives you the chance to respond differently. Jung often emphasized that the path of self-awareness is not about comfort, but about truth. And truth is not always easy to face. It requires honesty, patience, and courage. But it also brings something that nothing else can provide, a sense of inner alignment. Because when you are no longer controlled by unconscious patterns, you begin to live more intentionally. Your actions are no longer automatic reactions, but conscious choices. Your emotions are no longer overwhelming forces, but signals you can understand. Your thoughts are no longer commands, but possibilities you can evaluate. This is what it means to reclaim your inner authority, not by eliminating difficulty, but by changing your relationship with it. You begin to see challenges not as proof of inadequacy, but as opportunities for understanding. You begin to see discomfort not as something to avoid, but as something that points toward growth. And gradually, something else begins to emerge, a sense of stability that is not dependent on external circumstances. You no longer need everything to be perfect to feel at peace, because your peace is no longer based on what happens outside, but on how you relate to what happens within. This is the deeper meaning of freedom. Not the absence of problems, but the ability to navigate them without losing yourself. Not the absence of negative thoughts, but the ability to see them without being consumed by them. Jung once suggested that true change happens when you bring light to what was hidden, and this light is awareness. The more you become aware of your inner patterns, the less they control you, and the more you align with your deeper self, the more your life begins to reflect that alignment. You may not notice the transformation immediately. It does not always happen in dramatic ways. Sometimes it appears in small shifts, a moment where you pause instead of reacting, a situation where you respond differently than before, a thought that arises but no longer carries the same weight. These small changes accumulate, and over time, they reshape your entire experience. And eventually, something profound becomes clear. You are not your past. You are not your thoughts. You are not the voice that once defined you. You are something deeper, something more stable, something capable of change. This realization is not just comforting, it is empowering, because it means that no matter what you have experienced, no matter what patterns you have carried, you are not fixed. You are not limited to who you have been. You have the ability to evolve, to redefine yourself, to create a different internal reality. So the next time a negative thought appears, do not see it as an enemy. See it as a signal, a message pointing towards something that needs attention. Pause, observe, question, and then choose your response. Because every time you do this, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen a new one. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, you take a step toward freedom. And every time you refuse to believe a thought that limits you, you reclaim a part of yourself that was hidden beneath it. This is not a quick process. It is a gradual unfolding, but it is one of the most important journeys you can take. The journey inward, the journey of understanding your own mind. And as you continue on this path, remember this. You are not trying to become someone else. You are uncovering who you have always been beneath the noise, beneath the conditioning, beneath the fear. There is a version of you that is not defined by doubt, not controlled by old beliefs, not limited by past experiences. That version already exists within you, and every moment of awareness brings you closer to it. So begin where you are. Observe your thoughts, question them, understand them, and slowly, patiently transform them. Because in the end, the goal is not to destroy your mind, but to master your relationship with it. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. The same mind that once created suffering becomes a source of clarity, strength, and direction. And that is where your real power begins.